Hey everyone, how you doing? I am Brandon from Prop Store back here for another one of our Prop Store Friday live streams where we're talking about the upcoming entertainment memorabilia live auction. We're getting close now, about a week and a half to go. The auction takes place on Tuesday, June 29th, Wednesday, June 30th, and Thursday, July 1st. So we're going to talk today about Star Wars and some of the great Star Wars content that we have in the auction. But before we get into the goodies that are on the table in front of me, I want to talk a little bit more about auction logistics, especially for those of you who are watching who may have never participated in one of our auctions before. The most important thing to know if you want to bid is you need to register. So go to propstore.com/live auction. Make sure you are registered. There's a couple of different core ways to bid. One is bidding online. The other is bidding by telephone. You can also bid by what we call paper absentee form, where you're basically filling out a PDF and a traditional paper form or maybe a digital paper form and submitting that to us in advance, and then we execute those bids as proxy bids on the day. But the more common ways of bidding are via telephone, where you will actually be linked up on a phone call to someone who's here in-house in the bidding room with the live auctioneer, or online. And you can bid online in real time, meaning as the auctioneer is offering a given lot, you're placing bids in real time, waiting for the bids to come back against you and then bidding again. Or you can bid by online proxy, which basically means an online pre-bid, where the system executes the bid on your behalf to the level necessary to beat any other bidders. So there's a number of different ways to bid. If you go to our website, you can read more about each of those. We have some video tutorials on registering and bidding as well. If you have any questions, if you haven't done auctions before, let us know. We're happy to talk you through it. Excuse me. The registration is an important part. You want to get registered early. You don't want to be registering on the day because you want to be sure that you are all set, ready to go, no obstacles to bidding. Just so you know, there is no in-person bidding at this time. Obviously, we're coming out of the COVID period now, but because of the uncertainty around it, we didn't have any in-person bidding available for this auction. In-person bidding will definitely be coming back at some point in the future. Even though there's no in-person bidding, we do have a live auctioneer. So if you're at home, you will be able to follow the live stream. You'll go to propstore.com. You'll get links straight into that live stream, and you'll see an auctioneer sell the lots one by one. It's important to be aware that there are 3 different days. So depending on the lot number, your lot that you're interested in may be offered on day 1, 2, or 3. Just check out that catalog, look at the online catalog or the PDF or the printed catalog. You'll be able to figure out what day the lot's on, and you can make sure that you're tuned in at that time. We also have a couple of tools available to help you remember when the lot's coming up. So we have reminders that you can set up as an Outlook calendar event, a Google Calendar event, or we actually have, for the very first time, text message reminders, where if you subscribe to follow a certain lot, look for the button that says text reminder. You'll be able to set something up so that you get a text roughly half an hour before the lot goes across the auction block. And we are offering that now for bidders in the US as well as abroad to most countries. So if you're interested in that service, we should be able to set you up. It's very simple. You just need to put in your mobile number and let us know which lots you want to register for those alerts on, and we'll get you set. We also always advise just keeping an eye on the sale throughout the day. In general terms, it moves at about 50 lots an hour, but you do want to keep an eye on it so that you're sure not to miss your lot. That's a little bit about logistics. If you need any help, just reach out to us. We're here. Call us, email us. We'll help you get signed up. We'll make sure that you're all ready to go on Tuesday, the 29th. So that said, today we are going to talk about Star Wars, some of the great Star Wars content in the auction. We do have a lot of it. And the first thing I'll point out, I was just talking about those 3 different auction days. We do have Star Wars content on day 1 as well as day 3. So it's not all contained to just a single day. Be sure you're looking at both sections of the catalog so you see the material that's on day 1 as well as day 3. We've pulled out a handful of highlights today that I'm going to talk through. But there's a lot. There's a lot of Star Wars, especially as the Star Wars films, the series and the television series keeps growing. There's a lot of Star Wars content out there. There's a lot of Star Wars material in the auction as well. All different price points. You know, there are some very affordable items. There are a lot of production materials. There's some great crew items in the auction, and some of the higher end prop pieces as well, such as some of the items on the table in front of me. So let me start with I'm just going to get my white Mickey Mouse gloves on here before I handle any of the props. But let me start with the Biker Scout blaster that's here in front of me. So this is the small holdout pistol that the biker scouts or the scout troopers in Return of the Jedi had. It's cast in resin. It was obviously completely custom made for the film. You know, they wanted it to be a small blaster. They wear them in a holster that's on the side of their lower leg. You might remember when the biker scout pulls it out when he's on the speeder bike. What's really neat about this one is that it's a hero version. And that is identified by the construction of the piece itself. So there's some detailing on this one that most biker scout blasters don't have. I'm just gonna see if I can lift it up here very carefully. So the first thing I'll point out is the barrel. It has a very clean stepped down barrel that's probably machined out of metal with 3 different stages in it that's more detailed and cleaner in its construction than the barrel that was present on the non-hero blasters. The other thing of note is there's a reflective plastic lens in the back of the scope, which is basically simulating the glass in a real scope. And this greebly, this cylinder that comes off the back of it, which is sort of like a camshaft, is has got more detail to it than the non-hero versions. So it is specifically a hero version. I've seen a couple of others of these, but they were both in the Lucas archives. This is the only one I've ever seen in private hands. There are a couple of other biker scout blasters out there, but they are not hero versions, and there are differences in the barrel, the scope lens, and the greebly at the back. So this one's in very good condition. A bit of wear on it. You can tell there's some intentional distressing here where they've put some weathering, sort of like gray or silver, that's coming through underneath the wear marks. The only real thing of note on the condition is there was originally a cover here over this screw. You know, that wouldn't have been designed like that for camera. That had a little plug on it. You can see a matching plug here that covered the other screw that attached the scope. This one has come away. It could be restored very easily if someone wanted to do that. Obviously, we've opted to leave it as it is. It's, you know, it sort of shows some of the construction of the piece, but it is the only element that's missing on this particular prop. And it's worth pointing out that the handguard here is I believe a bent piece of plastic that's been applied to it, and the main body is cast in resin. The scope is cast in resin as a separate piece. And the biker scout gun, some fans are probably aware, it was made off of a wooden pattern that was made by Ira Keeler, well-known Industrial Light and Magic pattern maker, who also worked on a lot of the helmets for Return of the Jedi, such as some of the helmets that are sitting behind me. So this is a really nice piece. I was very excited to see this come in for the auction, especially because it's a hero version. Just set that back in its cradle. I'll stick with blasters for a minute. I'm going to talk through another blaster. This is the Rebel Trooper blaster, and this is also a version that was made for Return of the Jedi. You guys might remember these from the opening of the first film, right? The very first Star Wars, the first time we see Darth Vader come through on the Rebel blockade runner. The rebels are all posted up in the hallway, and they have blasters that look very much like this. It's not this exact prop that they're carrying. It's a different version made for that first film, because this one is made specifically for Return of the Jedi. But it is, in general, the same Rebel blaster with the silver nose cone or flash suppressor as kind of the defining trait. They also had a version of these Rebel blasters that they made for The Empire Strikes Back. They were cast in fiberglass, and they had the same silver nose cone, the same single point scope at the top, generally the same detailing and the same greeblies, but they were all cast fiberglass. For Return of the Jedi, they made the decision to build the props out of replica guns. So there's a company called MGC, the model gun company out of Japan, and they made replicas of firearms. So the base of this is a replica Sterling, and that gets cut about here. And they've added this flash suppressor, which is machined out of Delrin, which is like a hard black plastic. And then they've added the scope rail here, the single point scope, which is a real world found item. They've cut down the magazine. So this is meant to be the magazine for the ammunition. Initially, it's much longer. It sticks out to here or something. They've cut it down very short, and it's pop riveted in at the bottom. And then they've added some other detailing, like these little squares here on the top of the magazine, these springs on the side, and these little screws, washers. These are piston heads or machined copies of piston heads out of a model kit for like a model engine, a see-through visible V8 engine kit. And I love this prop. I always remember this because it's very well seen in the first Lucasfilm Archives book. So there's a book called From Star Wars to Indiana Jones, the best of the Lucasfilm Archives. That shows a Rebel blaster just like this very clearly. And even though they don't turn up in Return of the Jedi, they're well documented and they have a great aesthetic that matches the first two movies. And the reason that they're not in Jedi is ultimately just because they didn't need them. You know, they had several other blasters for the rebel troops. So they had a rifle, like the rifle that they're carrying on Endor. And I think they built this, maybe they intended it for use in holsters. As I say, it doesn't show up in the film, but still a great prop. The only real issue with this one is there should be a clear cover here that's coming off the front of the scope. And that has broken away at some point. You can see the red lens that remains inside of it. But other than that, it's in great condition. You know, production used a little bit of paint wear on the flash suppressor here, but a really nice piece and one of the only ones that I've ever seen out there in private collection. So we were excited to have that one come in as well. I'll jump around a little bit on the Star Wars timeline. Let's jump up to the 1990s, talk about a piece of artwork. So this painting here is by Ralph McQuarrie, very well-known Star Wars artist. And this was a work that he did in the 90s for a book called, I believe, called the Cantina Pop-Up Book, maybe the Mos Eisley Cantina Pop-Up Book. And you can see the portrait format of it. This was actually a concept for a cover for the book. They wound up going a slightly different direction with the cover, but they used this specific artwork as an interior painting. And it is seen on one of the pages inside the book. And if you follow McQuarrie's work at all, you know that it's very rare to get anything painted. There's a fair amount of, there are some McQuarrie pencil pieces around, but there's definitely more pencil work than there is actually painted illustrations. And of course, McQuarrie is most known for his painted illustrations, his production paintings, as they're known, that were used to help sell the movie and help all the crew visualize the films as they were developing. So this was done a little bit later in the early to mid 90s, probably around 93 or 94, but it's in his distinct signature style. There are things that jump out to me right away, like the airbrush blending of the sky and the transition up to the night sky. You see that in a lot of McQuarrie's paintings. I love the little blob of orange over here on the side where he's testing the perfect orange color for the Tatooine sky. I love the dual suns of Tatooine, and of course the distinct architecture and the sort of characters or runes they put around the top of the buildings, which wound up coming through a little bit in The Force Awakens. They picked up on some of McQuarrie's designs and built those into the sets. You've got a space cruiser there at the top, maybe the Millennium Falcon or just something like it, and obviously a sea of characters and a couple of droids that are running around the bottom. So anything painted by McQuarrie is very rare, very sought after, and that's a great piece that we have in our auction. Let me just show you one other McQuarrie piece while I'm on that subject, because we do have a couple. I think we have 3, maybe 4 McQuarrie pieces in total. I want to pull out one of those pencil pieces that I was just speaking about. So this piece was done for The Empire Strikes Back. And you may recognize the image because this wound up being converted into a final production painting for The Empire Strikes Back. It's a well-known production painting. It was included in the Empire Strikes Back portfolio. And I can speak a little bit about McQuarrie's process and how this pencil piece relates to that. It's on vellum or tissue paper, which has been taped to a white paper by Ralph himself, I would say, just to make it easier to read the sketch. But the reason he would work on vellum first is to basically get the line work of the painting established. And so he would do sometimes multiple versions of the characters, elements like Luke on the Tauntaun on vellum. And then once he was satisfied with those, he would transfer them to the illustration board. So he would actually put a little bit of graphite on the back side of the vellum and then trace over his own lines again to get an outline transferred to illustration board a little bit more like the painted piece that I just showed you. And then go in and do all the work in airbrush and gouache and such to do the final painting. So obviously what's great about this is the content, right? It's Luke, he's on his Tauntaun, it's The Empire Strikes Back, and it's a well-known, published, highly seen image, or the final version of it is. It's a prelim for it. So that's another great McQuarrie piece. We do have a couple of others. There's a really nice Yoda Macquarie piece in the auction, which wound up being on a poster, the final artwork of that one. The Yoda is another pencil piece, Yoda on Dagobah. Take a look for that one in the catalog. I love Ralph McQuarrie. I worked on a Ralph McQuarrie book called Star Wars Art, Ralph McQuarrie. If you haven't seen it, if you're interested in McQuarrie, take a look at the book. If you're interested in collecting McQuarrie originals, look through the catalog, because like I say, we do have a few others. Okay, let me move off from artwork. Any questions, Matt? Any questions coming through on the feed so far? Thank you very much. That's what I'm here to do. So yeah, move. Sure. Okay. Shipping quotes. Well, why don't I cover it now since you've brought the topic up? Um, Most items you should be able to get a shipping quote for through the online catalog. You should be able to get a real-time shipping quote directly. Something that's small and manageable like this. We have a system that has the dimensions plugged in. It'll take you and your zip code or postcode and work out exactly what it's going to cost. If you're looking for a quote for multiple items together, that's a little bit more complex. You may need to contact us directly. Or if you're looking for a quote for a large oversized piece, something that has to go by a special freight service, something that needs a crate, like maybe the R2 unit that's over here next to me, if you guys can see that. Those ones you're going to have to reach out to us on, and we'll have to work through and get you a quote manually. So we can give you quotes on most items ahead of the auction. As I say, a lot of them you'll be able to get directly from the online catalog. So just take a look there. There's a button, just like the catalog reminder buttons that I was talking about earlier. Very simple to get quotes for most items.
As far as the furry pieces too, a lot of them out in public hands. So like, what is kind of the status on a lot of those?
Well, Mcquarrie art in general is highly sought after because Ralph McQuarrie, if you don't know, he's really the seminal Star Wars artist. He's one of the first artists that Lucas hired to work on the very first movie, and he designed a lot of the key elements of the Star Wars films, especially character-related elements. So things like Darth Vader and Stormtrooper, those are Ralph McQuarrie designs. They're things that he knocked out in an amazingly short amount of time, and they become some of the backbone of all the Star Wars films. So he's a very important artist, and his art is very sought after by Star Wars collectors. We have had a few pieces in prior auctions. You can go on to propstore.com/auction. You can always browse prior auction history. So our auctions go back to 2014. We sold thousands of items through auction. You can see all those, and you can see their sale prices in our past catalog. So if you're interested, if you're just doing your research, we always recommend that people do research as they're stepping into a new space. Go through the past catalog. There's a lot of valuable information there, and it'll also help guide you as to price levels. And obviously we have pre-sale estimates on everything. The pre-sale estimate is never a guarantee as to what it will sell for. It's intended to give you a guide as to what it will sell for. You can also do your own research on what things have sold for in the past, which will help paint a better picture in your mind before auction day. Let me move on to lightsabers. Everybody loves lightsabers, right? Lightsabers probably the most recognizable defining prop of all the Star Wars films. And we have a couple of fun ones in this auction. This is from episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And this is Anakin's lightsaber. It was a new lightsaber this design was seen specifically in Revenge of the Sith for the first time. This is obviously based on the classic Graflex lightsaber, which is the saber that Obi-Wan pulls out of the trunk and gives to Luke in episode 4, New Hope. And so basically they were trying to stick with that same core design, but they've updated it a little bit to make it more practical for the dueling work. One of the trademark elements of that film, episode 3, is the 30-minute lightsaber duel at the Act 3 of the movie with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor as Anakin and Obi-Wan, using a saber like this and a saber like the green Obi-Wan on the table in front of me. So, they were constantly working on the design of the lightsaber, the fighting lightsaber, specifically on the prequel films, because they were trying to make the saber duels a lot more intense than what we had seen in the original trilogy. So I think for episodes 1 and 2, the blades were aluminum. For episode 3, they converted to a carbon fiber blade, which is what this is. It's a very lightweight blade. It's been wrapped in like a heat shrink film to prevent any chips of paint from flying off and hurting anyone while they're dueling with them. And there's a threaded rod that's attached to the blade itself, which threads down into the handle and attaches the whole prop together. The blades are interchangeable so that if they break or bend, they can be changed out, although I think that was a bigger issue on the first 2 prequel films than the third film, because I think the carbon fiber material is much more indestructible. But it's really interesting to look at these handles up close, because this has the grips on it like the grips in A New Hope, but they've been made low profile, again, so they're easy to handle. And then they've choked down the neck of it here to a really small diameter, which basically makes it easier for someone to twirl. So you can pinch it in your hand right there, and he could twirl the lightsaber in a much more effective way than if you didn't have that choke down point. The handle itself is plated. You can see the metallic plating on it. it's two different pieces. So the lower half of the handle here is one part, and then the upper half is another part, and it all gets brought together when you bring the blade into it and thread the assembly together. So this is the first Episode 3 Anakin Saber that we've had in auction, and it's a beautiful piece. You can see a fair amount of wear on the handle where it's been handled during production. Just a really nice example. So let me show you the matching counterpart, which is the Obi-Wan. So I know with the Obi-Wan sabers, they had a few different styles of handles. And again, it's all about the practicality of the action sequences. Obviously, they would always have hero versions. We've offered a couple of hero versions through our auctions in the past. So they did have hero, what we'll call belt hangers, meaning they were never designed to take a blade. They've just worn sort of as costume pieces or handled when it wasn't showing the blade. They had hero versions of all the character sabers, but then they also had different grades of fighting sabers. So they had ones that had fully detailed handles that are not going to be as comfortable to hold, but are a little bit better on camera for close-up, but could still take the blade. And then they had ones like this, which is kind of a mid-grade version, some detailing in the handle, some raised elements to the mid-grip here and the pommel. And then there was actually another version that was extremely simple. You could almost call it like a pipe handle, where it's just a piece of metal that's been painted with black and silver sections. Very easy to handle and hold. This one, again, it's probably a few different sections. The emitter is plated. The rest of it looks to be painted. It's probably machined out of a plastic, the handle elements, and then it has that same carbon fiber blade we were talking about on the Anakin lightsaber. So it's in good condition overall. You know, a little bit of wear on the plating, especially here at the emitter, a little bit of wear on the pommel down at the bottom, and the blade itself shows signs of some use, you know, where the plastic coating has lifted off the carbon fiber surface. If you're a lightsaber fan, in my opinion, these are some of the best examples that we've seen so far. I think everybody looks at that third film as a highlight of the prequel series, and especially that last half an hour with that duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan. I think it's a moment that resonates with fans. So take a look at those in the catalog. We do have a few other lightsabers as well. We have some production-made handles, which are going to be at a lower price point, obviously, to the finished sabers that we were just looking at. There's a replica lightsaber that I'll talk about for a minute. It's rare that we have replicas in our auction, but we do sometimes take them. And this is a really high-end replica of Alec Guinness's lightsaber from the first Star Wars, A New Hope. And what's neat about this is that it's made from all the same real-world components that the original prop was made from for that Episode 4. So the real version of this lightsaber, the film-used version, is missing in action. No one knows where it is. It's not in any private collection that we're aware of. It's not at the Lucas Archives. It's unknown what happened to it. It may have been stripped back to different components and returned to rental houses after production. But this is made from exactly the same pieces. And to quickly walk through it, the emitter here is a part of a jet engine. The grip section with the neck here is actually part of a grenade, a stick grenade, a British World War II stick grenade, or maybe it's World War I. The clamp is off of a Graflex flash unit, same flash unit that they used for Luke's lightsaber in Episode 4. And then the part down here is called a booster. It's off of a Browning machine gun. And finally, the end cap is faucet handle, a little tap handle for turning water on and off. So this is built in from all the same real world components. It has a real heft to it, you know, especially the grenade and the booster, I think, are heavy pieces. So there's a real weight to this. You wouldn't necessarily want to carry it around on set. And the parts have a beautiful patina and finish from natural aging because they are decades old. So that was a really neat replica piece that came in, especially since the original of that prop is no longer known to exist. Let's talk about a little bit of newer Star Wars. So we have some newer content as well. We have a great droid. I don't know, can you guys see that droid on the live stream? So this is the R2 SHP droid that was seen in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. This is a droid that was custom built. It's made primarily from plastic and aluminum. It has metal skins, which have a really nice weathering and patina to them. Obviously, it's blue, which makes it stand out in the film. It's not seen extensively in the movie, but you can pick it out in the background of a couple of shots. And it is fully remote controlled. So There's an RC unit. I think someone's having a little play with it right now. It runs and drives backwards, forwards. The head spins. It has the lights, the whole 9 yards. Be great fun at a kid's birthday party or in a Star Wars museum. We've had a couple of other droids from the most recent Star Wars films. Film used droids, really cool, really rare. I don't know if there are any around really from the original trilogy or the prequels. So the fact that a couple have surfaced from the newer films makes them pretty special. And as a separate lot to the R2 droid, we have a R6 style dome in a matching blue color scheme. And so basically, economies of filmmaking, they'll try to get multiple usage out of one piece. And with these droids, they could change the heads around to make them look like different characters. So this droid was, this R6 head was at one point put on the body of that R2 droid, and it was shot as well. You don't see this in the final cut of the film, but you do see it in some behind the scenes footage. I believe there's a web featurette where it features. I think it's also in the visual dictionary. If you take a look at that, the visual dictionary that came out for episode 9, and there may be a toy version of it as well. So this is a separate lot. The droid itself is one lot. The R6 head is another lot, but also a great piece of Star Wars history. We also have, if you guys can follow me over here to the other side, this is from The Mandalorian, which everyone is very excited about at the moment. The Mandalorian has been a very popular show on Disney Plus. And this is basically a fan kit that was rented in for the production. So it's well documented at this point that on The Mandalorian, in order to get the crowds of stormtroopers together, they brought in the 501st, which is the popular Star Wars costuming group that's been around for 20, 25 years. And they used members of the 501st in their suits because their suits look so good. It's a very efficient and effective way for the show to get those guys together. This is one of those suits that belonged to a 501st member who was part of the Mandalorian shoots. We've had a couple of these in the past. I think this may be the third one that we've had. They're really high quality. The world of trooping and costuming has come so far over the past 20 years. So this is highly accurate. It's probably molded from an original. It's in really good condition. It's the colors held up well. It's a nice ivory color. It's not bright white, but it hasn't yellowed either. Sometimes you see them and they're really going yellow. This one is not there. It presents really nicely, and it is the full costume. We have it set up here just as the waist up setup. But if you look in the auction catalog, you'll see it is the full costume that's included, including, I believe, the original neck seal and undersuit. So if you're a Mandalorian fan, there's not much around from that show. That's probably one of your few opportunities to get a Mandalorian piece. I believe there is a blaster with it, yes. Yeah, so we don't have the blaster out here, but again, if you take a look at the online catalog, you'll see the blaster that's included with that lot also. Chewbacca, talk about Chewbacca for a minute. So this is another original trilogy piece. This came originally from the Stuart Freeborn archive. If you don't know about Stuart Freeborn and the Stuart Freeborn archive, it's one of the major, I'll say, finds in prop collecting history. And it was another prop store project. It predates myself. It was something that Stephen and Tim in Prop Store in the UK managed around, I want to say 2004, maybe 2003. And basically Stuart Freeborn was downsizing out of a house that he had lived in for decades. And he had a storage there that was just filled with things from all his movies. So the Star Wars films, the Superman films, Peter Sellers films, work with Alec Guinness, all sorts of different things, treasures that came out of the Stuart Freeborn collection. And this is one of those. So this is an original production-made Chewbacca face. It's a foam latex face. It's very thin. It had to be thin so that the mechanical understructure could work the mask. Obviously, it doesn't have the hair on. The hair would have been hand-applied, glued down, but they would have backup skins in case they develop tears, like in the corner of the mouth where it's stretching a lot as the actor Peter Mayhew worked the mouth. And this is one of those backup skins. It's displayed on an original biscuit foam casting of Peter Mayhew, which is the same thing that would form the basis of the underskull in the mask, the final mask itself. So Chewbacca is another one, beloved Star Wars character. This is a really nice original Chewbacca piece. We don't know which of the 3 original films it's from, but it definitely is original trilogy. And even though the foam latex is very thin and very old, it's held up fairly well. It does have some deterioration on this side, especially where it's thinnest around the eyes. There's some cracking. There are some components missing, but overall, I would say it's stable. And if you take care of it, it should last. And taking care of it is something that I can speak about for a moment as well. We sometimes get asked, especially by new buyers who have bought things in our auction, how do I make sure that this lasts? How do I make sure it's going to be around in the future? And I'll be honest, it's a little bit more challenging with something like the Chewbacca skin, which is foam latex, than something like one of these blasters, which is resin or metal. The general rules to adhere to are pretty straightforward. No UV light. So sunlight, windows, especially, very dangerous. Some windows are treated. They have films, or you can put a film on them to block UV light, but the sun is a killer. You see that with artwork. Sometimes you'll see it when you're out on the street. You walk down and you see shop fronts. You can tell things that have been sitting in shop windows for a long time because they are heavily faded. So watch out for that sun. You can actually buy now on Amazon a UV light meter, a very basic UV light meter for a couple of $100 that you can use in your house to tell whether you're getting any UV light. Traditional light bulbs like incandescent or fluorescent light bulbs can also put out a lot of UV light. Any light source that's hot is probably putting out some kind of UV. LED lighting tends to be the best to have no or minimal UV. And the other thing that you want to be aware of is handling. So handling can be very dangerous, just oils in your hands. That's why I'm wearing the gloves at the moment. Or just with something like the foam latex, which was originally a flexible material. Now that it's solidified a little, if you handle it, it may crack. So you want to be very gentle with your handling. A lot of collectors will put things into showcases like what's behind me and handle in a very limited manner. And the third, I would say, is temperature, right? So you want to try to keep a fairly constant temperature. Don't leave it in a hot public storage locker. Don't put it anywhere that's going to get too cold. If you're in the Northeast, you really want a stable temperature somewhere around that 70-degree mark. And if you do those things, you should be in good shape with most props, costumes, artwork, things like that. There are some materials that are specialty materials that will break down over time. And there are also some specialist companies out there like Tom Spina Designs. We'll give him a little nod for a moment. Tom has really carved out a niche as a pioneer in the world of restoration and preservation, especially of the more unstable materials like a foam latex. So there are options to go to as well if you want to speak to a professional about how you can stabilize something for the future. Okay, so that's a little bit about preservation. Let me talk a little bit about the things behind me in the case. So I think I've already spoken about the Carrie Fisher script. If you haven't heard me talk about that, there's a video online. Hit the online catalog, watch the video where I go through some of the pages of that because it's really special. I think I'll talk about the helmets at the top for a moment because they're very nice. The C-3PO here was done for The Empire Strikes Back, and it's white because it's unfinished. One of the things that happened after the first Star Wars is Anthony Daniels obviously had a struggle with that C-3PO costume. The costume itself is an amazing feat of design and engineering. It's amazing that they got Anthony Daniels into it at all, but obviously it was very claustrophobic. A lot of it is fiberglass, so it wasn't the most comfortable thing for him to wear. They were trying to improve the suit for the second film, and so they went to great trouble and expense to do these helmets in injection molded plastic, which is a real manufacturing technique. It's not super common in film production. Generally, they would do things like fiberglass in a rubber mold because that can be done more quickly and easily by plasterers. Injection molding is expensive. It involves metal molds, steel molds that have to be cut. And unfortunately, when they did it, they went through the process. They had maybe 15 of these helmets made up, and there was just enough shrinkage in the material that it didn't fit his head very well anymore. So they didn't wind up using them. But there's a great photo that runs in a lot of the Star Wars books where you see about 12 of those helmets together on the shelves, and you can tell it's one exactly like this. This one is numbered inside. And all the examples I've seen, I've probably seen 4 or 5 of them that still exist, 1 or 2 in the Lucas archives and a couple in private hands. They're all numbered in the same blue marker. It's just the back plate and the front plate. Doesn't have the bolts. Obviously, it wasn't needed, so they never finished it. But as a C-3PO piece, it's still very nice. And it kind of reminds me of the white droids that you see walking around on Hoth, even though that's not exactly what it is. The Emperor's Royal Guard mask here is a production-made prototype, not a final, not a film used, but it does originate with one of the helmet crew who worked on that movie, and it is built up of parts that were made at exactly the same time as the film used parts and assembled during that time, during the production of the film. It has a very distinct red paint job. It's interesting, people don't realize, but it's actually seamed, so it's a different parts of vacuum plastic that are seamed right down the center. You can see the patch panels on the inside that they used to put the two halves together. It's obviously got the red lens where the actor would see out. And there's only a couple of those around as well, so that's a rare one. I'll talk about the Darth Vader helmet. This is a touring helmet. When we say touring, we basically mean a costume designed to go out on the road. They did a lot with Vader at public appearances, so shopping malls, premieres of the film, different events related to the Star Wars toys. You could basically rent Darth Vader to show up at your event, not necessarily a private event like a birthday party, but a public event as a marketing tool. You could also rent for a time Boba Fett. So Vader and Boba Fett were on the road together. And a lot of the touring helmets were made by a company called Farmers, or NJ Farmer and Associates out of the UK. Farmer's history, he was part of the Palitoy Toy Company, which is the Kenner equivalent in the UK. Through that, he had connections to Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm in the UK wanted to have more Darth Vader costumes made, so they had a little stock that was available to go out on the road. And Farmer was the vendor who wound up making those and supporting Lucasfilm on marketing and promotional events, at least through the mid-'80s, maybe into the late '80s. So this is an original 1980s Farmer touring helmet. And it's two separate components, the face and the dome. We've had at least one of these come through our auctions in the past, and this one's very comparable to that one. And the final helmet over here is Lando's disguise helmet from Return of the Jedi. Again, it's a prototype, so not a film-used helmet, but it is an original, again, originating with a crew member who worked on those helmets, one of the plastic boys, they called themselves for Return of the Jedi. There's a great story about the design of this helmet. If you haven't read it, the story goes that Nilo Rodis-Jamero, who's one of the co-costume designers on Return of the Jedi, they were playing softball, right? So Lucasfilm sort of famously had these softball fields at Skywalker Ranch. They always had company softball games. And there was a day when Nilo looked over and there was a guy with a softball glove on his head. And so the brown leather sections, vertical sections on the top of the helmet here are basically born out of softball glove fingers sitting on top of somebody's head, which is a fun story. And this one is coated in real leather as well. It's got a great age and patina to it also. There's another piece of art here. This is not an original art, but printed art. So it's a die line from the first film for a Joe Johnston drawing of the escape pod. There's a few art pieces like that, production copies, storyboards. I think we have some copy storyboards and some hand-drawn storyboards in the auction. I know we have some great binders of storyboards that came from one of the key ILM crew guys with minor notes, but really nice complete binders with a few hundred pages in them. So take a look at those. And let me show you while I'm here also the Ewok Axe. So everybody loves the Ewoks, right? Can't get enough Ewoks. This is an Ewok Axe. It's pretty basic. It's a real piece of wood that's made up the handle, and then the rock here is cast in like a lightweight foam or urethane, so that basically an Ewok actor can go beat up on a stormtrooper actor without anybody getting hurt. And this one has provenance. It traces to the collection of Jim Shp, who was the U.S. art director on the film, and I believe it comes with a letter from Shp. How are we doing out there, Matt? Any more questions coming in? Anything else that I can answer for folks? Okay. Okay, well, I think that covers most of the Star Wars content that's here. Like I say, in total, there are dozens of Star Wars lots. The prequels, the original trilogy, the latest films, there's all types of content. There's crew shirts, crew hats, there's production materials like storyboards. There are photographs that have never been seen. There's a great lot of ILM slides from the first film and the second film. Some really cool shots of models, things like the probe droid. There's some very nice original pieces of artwork like the Mcquarries that we spoke about. There's production binders. There's even there's a videotape of an animatics test that they did for the Rancor for Return of the Jedi, which has never been seen before. We got it transferred. I think you can see some clips of that online, which is really neat. And of course, there are some very nice props and costumes like the blasters, the lightsabers that we just looked at, and the Mandalorian stormtrooper next to me. So take a look at the catalog, go through it. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be here. I think we're doing another live stream next Friday. Yeah, and we've got new videos that are going up throughout next week as well. So you will see more content on our social channels. And as always, we're here if you have any questions. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at the live auction on the 29th.